Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to talk about making your first $1 million. So that's right, I have officially made $1 million at the end of 2020 here. So kind of a big accomplishment for me. Not really something I was like working on as a specific goal, like, oh, I must make X amount of dollars, or I must make X amount of dollars before this age. But today I'm going to talk about tips, tricks, kind of my advice, reflecting back on making that million, trying to debug a little bit of it, because I think a lot of people have a misconception on, I don't know, what making $1 million means. Where does that money go? And no, I'm not filthy rich. I don't have all this money stacked up. It has been spent on a variety of things. And that leads me here to my first point, which is making $1 million takes a ton of money. So let's start off with here a little bit on my background here. You can make $1 million doing a variety of careers. So please do not think my path is the only path, or that you must do what I do to get there. There are a ton of people out there that have made $1 million before the age of 35. So just going to lay that out here. My path, though, is I went, got a finance degree in undergrad, thought that would be, the ticket to a really successful career. That's not really what happened. I finished up my business degree with a degree in finance, and I didn't have the tools or the knowledge to really do what I wanted to do. I found most corporate finance, a lot of the traditional finance routes somewhat boring. And then I found out that there is this kind of good old boys club in much of finance where it prevents you from getting into a lot of these banks, or at least this is how I saw it when I started. The more I've worked in the industry, the more I've realized there are ways to get in, but you have to be at schools that are close to the job field themselves. So as a tip here, if you want to work in a specific industry, for example, let's say finance, or let's say like fashion, New York City is going to be that hub. If you're near there, if you go to a school there, even if it's a general school, an average school, maybe less than an average school, your chances of getting a job in that city are much, much higher than if you were to go somewhere like me in Washington State. I am so far from Chicago and New York, which are kind of the finance hubs, and even like North Carolina and Texas. There's really no way for you to get there unless you know somebody and you can convince them to hire you. It's a whole process. So definitely go to school, do your education. So again, it could be college, it can be vocational schools, trainings, any sort of advanced training. Go to that educational system near where you want to work. That will make it much, much easier. You don't necessarily need like the top name on your resume. And that leads to the second point here of education. You need more education. So I invested, my education, my wife and I, for example, we spent $160,000 in student loans to be able to get our master's degrees and our undergrads, so that we had a shot, a probability here, or taking a little bit of a risk that we would actually be able to get good, decent jobs here. So again, I've made $1 million from this because I had the degree. So after I graduated with my undergrad degree, wasn't the right location, wasn't really the right field to do quantitative finance. I needed a financial engineering degree, or an applied economics degree, or an applied math degree, or a stats master's. I didn't know half of that to start out with here. So again, do your research on what you want to do, but you're going to need a lot of education. And so when I say $160,000, that's the principal component. When you pay interest with that, you're looking at probably over $200 and something thousand in total output of cash. So I don't remember exactly the amounts here, but imagine you're paying $200,000 to $250,000 right off the bat. And that leads me to my other point here. You have $1 million. You're going to be paying at minimum 25% of tax, which puts you on to $750,000. We'll talk about living here in a second on why that's actually lower. But anyways, you have to pay for that education as well. Getting that education, there are a lot of fields that are a better bang for your buck. So my path required a master's degree, preferably a PhD. I took the gamble and I did the master's. Again, my master's alone was $70,000 for just tuition. So that is massive. That's a huge chunk of cash. And then, you have to pay for other living expenses, and I paid for my wife's master as well. So you need to invest in yourself. You don't necessarily need to go to college depending on your path. Your path might require, like mine required a master's. You might require some sort of vocational training. Invest in yourself. That is the best investment you can ever make. It's better than the stock market. It's better than derivative products. It's better than real estate. If you invest in yourself and you really put in the time and the effort, you can make a lot more money than you expect from all these other alternative sources here. And that leads me back to the location piece here. Location is crucial, right? It is very, very important. So I'm going to kind of differentiate here. Making $1 million versus having $1 million is very, very different. Okay. I spent a year. So let's talk about this first. I moved from Washington State to Michigan to go to school. I had to pay for all that, right? The moving expenses. I went from Michigan to Dallas and Texas, worked there for a while. Then I went from Dallas to New York City, worked there, and came back to Dallas. Again, there's a lot of cost in moving around the country. Again, you're going to have to move if you want to get paid the most money possible. But also, if you want to be in a specific field and you're not really near that location and you end up getting a job there, you need to move where the jobs are going to be located, right? So a lot of people, you grow up in a city, right? I love my hometown in Spokane, Washington, but there's no real finance, investing, quantitative finance there. So I had to move. So you're going to have to move in many situations to be able to complete your goals and to really optimize your earning potential here and your potential as a career. But I ended up living in New York City. I paid about $3,800, almost $4,000 per month to live there. I lived there for a year. I was actually living in New Jersey, so right across the water. I paid a ton of money in taxes. My taxes were actually higher in New Jersey than they would have been in New York City. And New York City has city tax, I think state tax and federal tax, or if not, it's city tax and federal tax. It's a lot of tax. So again, when you live in these high cost areas, right, you might make $1 million and you might end up paying out a ton of money just to live there. Food costs were expensive. Insurance costs for driving a car, for example, super, super expensive. Again, other things like your apartments, your water, your electrical, all of that is super expensive here. So you're going to make a little bit more, but you typically do not make more, right, an equivalent amount based on cost. So cost of living is crucial. And what I mean by that, I was not making anywhere near double in New York City versus Dallas, but I moved back to Dallas because I could make slightly less money than I was making in New York City, but the cost of living was half. So the difference between Dallas and New York City for me, I paid double in New York City, or if you look at New York City's, cost of living, I paid half of that cost in Dallas, Texas. So for me, there were jobs in Dallas, Texas. I moved again. I tried to make sure that I was in the right job market. There were lots of employers there, but also where you live and the cost of living there will impact how much you make, but also how much you get to save. So saving is going to be a crucial piece here because you can reinvest that back into yourself. And you can use that to kind of set up some other safety nets, right? Put it into savings, 401k, retirement, things like that. And then my final point here really comes from the book, The Wealth of Nations. If you haven't read it, most people probably find it super boring, but as an economist, I really like the book. One of the key takeaways from this book, which was written in 1776, so it's very old, referenced many, many times by many, many people. Specialization is going to be where you make the most money possible. And I'll talk about the little trade-off here in a second. But for me, getting into quantitative finance, it wasn't just being a generalist. Being a generalist doesn't pay very well. When you're in a career, you're building a career, maybe you're building your own side hustle, your business, something, right? You're really building something. You need to specialize in what you're doing, right? You don't want to be a generalist because generalists don't make nearly as much as specialists. And so for a career, when you're building that career, right, people are looking for high performers. High performers are typically people that do really well in what they're being paid to do. So if you pick a career, get really, really, really good at it and be a specialist. Now, the flip side of this is, let's say, you become specialized in one area and you're really, really good at it, and all of a sudden the market changes and they don't need those people anymore, right? A lot of times it's really hard to find work if you're so specialized to switch over, but I would tell you, I think it is far more worth it to take that little bit of a gamble here, that little bit of a risk, and focus on being super specialized and get really good at what you do, because the better you are at what you do, you can typically make more. And so this is where I think a lot of people miss this too. So a college degree is great and it's wonderful and it can add value, but it can also weigh you down and cost a bunch of money, and you might not even need that degree. So think about, like your local, tradesmen's types of businesses, right? Plumbers, electricians, even like roofers, landscapers, all these types of jobs. These are owned by someone who started that business, right? And a lot of them don't have a college degree. Now, they might make $1 million, and I'm sure many of them do, before the age of 35. The reason for this is they're very, very good at what they do. They optimize their business. They're like the best of the best in their area at doing it. They have good quality work, good pricing. Their business grows. They get a bunch of employees on board and they grow these amazing businesses. So, right, being specialized is one of the most crucial pieces for this. And to do this, kind of the final wrap-up point here, is be passionate about what you do, guys. So love what you do because you're going to be doing it for a long time. If you want to be really good, you need to be specialized in it, right? And you want to do it for long enough to be better than many other people around you, right? So getting that success, getting paid more, right? Focus on both your passion, so be excited about it so you can stick with it in the long run, so that perseverance, but also focus on generating value. Okay, this is, I think, the biggest takeaway from the whole video. If you've made it this far, congrats in the video here, but making value for people is the key piece here. If you can generate a lot of value for someone, in the long run, you'll end up making a lot more, okay? Don't focus on the money piece. It's not necessarily the best goal to focus on here. If you focus on adding as much value as possible, you will eventually get paid more. So I've been doing YouTube for, I think, 4 or 5 years now, right? And I make tiny, tiny amounts of profit on this, but I'm doing it for the long haul. I enjoy doing it. I'm passionate about it. But it also ties into my regular daily career. It keeps me up on my toes, studying, looking at new information. It's tied together with that. And a lot of that YouTube has driven, my expertise also on a career perspective here. So having that expertise, having that excitement, sticking with it, but also seeing how I can add value has been the biggest piece here, right? People pay for value. If you can do something that no one else can do and you can add a lot of value, that's where you make a lot of money. People are willing to pay you a little bit extra for it. Again, if you have an online business, for example, let's say you make stuff on Etsy and you sell it, if you can add value and it's a really good deal for the buyer, right? You add that good amount of value here. Maybe your skill is so unique and so rare, it's worth a lot. People will pay you more. So focus on creating value, not on generating cash. Value is far better. It'll make you feel better because you can see the impact you have on people. You can see they're excited to buy your product or pay for your services. You can see, all the good that you're doing. It'll keep you going in the long run. If you just focus on the money and you're just in it for the money, life will be very dead and hollow on the inside because you'll get all this money, perhaps, maybe. A lot of times people don't like to pay people that seem greedy or so money driven. But again, if you can add that value, you'll feel better about yourself. Others will enjoy your business and it will just keep compiling and you'll make more and more in the long run. So anyways, those are my tips and tricks to making $1 million. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell button for weekly notifications. And as always, until next time.